Hey everyone, let's talk about free love. We'll talk about families and babies. We'll talk about progressive movement and failure of parenting. And what I'd like to do is by the end of this, have a pretty good idea about what a baby is, the responsibilities that fall on us, the impact when we fail our responsibilities, and why we can't consider other options, progressive options, to avoid our responsibilities. All right, so let's let this show begin. So back in the 60s, we had this movement by a lot of young people wanted free love. They wanted to be able to have sex with whoever they wanted, whenever they wanted, inside, outside marriage, between marriages. They were party animals. And you can see that by this picture. And they tried to normalize it. They wanted it to be accepted as nature, natural. And but of course, they didn't like responsibility as well, because with sex comes pregnancy and then kids, and they didn't like that, right? They wanted to have the fun without having the adult responsibilities that go with it. So yeah, picture paints 1,000 words. I think this is very illustrative. Let's look to Winston Churchill. The price of greatness is responsibility. And the idea here is that when you have power, you have responsibility, not just ethically to use that power in a good way, not to hurt others, but to help others, but also simply in maintaining your power. So, for instance, if you got $1 million and you take it out in cash and burn it, you don't have $1 million anymore. So the price of having that $1 million is that you have to take care of it. Because as soon as you don't, you lose it. So from those who lose their talents will be taken away. And from those who improve their talents, more talents will be added from the New Testament. So that is the price of greatness. And to be honest, the greatest thing that you can do and the greatest responsibility that you can have is to be a parent, to raise a child. So we have these precious babies, and they are oh so cute and precious and beautiful. Evolutionarily speaking, we are used to seeing babies in this form, and so we've come to understand and appreciate their value. But we haven't been accustomed to seeing them before they're born, and so it's a lot harder to associate those stages of development with being precious as well. So we see a 2-year-old is cute, a 4-year-old is cute, all the way up 6 and 8, different forms. They look very different from this, but we recognize them as cute because we, evolutionarily speaking, we've seen them. Before they're born, we can recognize that a bulging belly is also very beautiful, but the kid inside that's kind of causing the bulging belly is in a form that we're not accustomed to seeing. Looking at some ways of thinking from the progressives, they say sex should be allowed and enjoyed by both sexes without, you can replace all this with responsibility, the fear of falling pregnant every time. That fear of falling pregnant is responsibility, okay? You don't want to fear responsibility. And that's what birth control has brought us. A decrease in the fear of falling pregnant, but not to 100%, as they say in the black text between. And then the second red text I've highlighted, aborting a fetus is not equivalent to killing a baby. This is what they have to think. The progressives have to think this way in order to be able to kill before the baby is born. So now how they defend that is a bit arbitrary and barbaric. Because, as we follow the quote, unless the fetus can survive outside the womb, it is only a bunch of cells. Now, I'm a bunch of cells, you're a bunch of cells, the person who said this is a bunch of cells, but we want to deprive, or they want to deprive the humanity of the baby when it can't survive outside the womb, which I think is atrocious. And it's equivalent to trying to deprive a 2-year-old of their humanity and their right to live if they can't survive outside the family. They kick it out in the streets and see if the 2-year-olds can survive, right? So, and they want to be able to kick out well, they won't say for the 2-year-old any baby born, but they want to be able to kick it out because that gives them the right or the power or the justification of feeling like they don't have to have the responsibility anyways, right? So you take that fetus out of the womb, and then they don't have the responsibility of nurturing and growing it and helping the child to develop until they're a good adult. Because you took it out, and now you assume, if society takes the baby out of the womb, now society accepts responsibility for that baby because they don't have to. That's the ultimate goal, is even if you can protect the baby by taking it out of the womb, their definition for humanity, they still don't have to accept responsibility because it's taken out. But yeah, how do you put it? There's no reason to believe that humanity should be stripped, that personhood should be stripped from a baby simply because they exist inside the womb. It's just one stage, one phase of their development. So let's look at the unborn baby. We need to be able to think about, and this is where evolution has not served us very well, because we haven't been able to see the baby before it's born. We need to be able to think about the baby looking like this, exactly the same as the baby looking when the baby's delivered, and is exactly the same as when the baby's 2 or 4 or 6 or 8, because these are different stages in the baby's development, and that's all. They have the same human DNA, the same potential for becoming an adult, the same everything, right? We created the baby. So we have to escape the platitudes of the free love progressive movement. Some of the platitudes are, for instance, freedom of choice. But they won't say with that platitude what the choice is to kill a baby or to kill a human. They won't say that because it's hard to hear. So if you can escape hearing the truth, the elephant in the room, then maybe you don't have to face the guilt, the feeling bad about that particular way of thinking. This author, this is the second quote I'm going to show you, doesn't like abstinence, obviously. They call it a dumb idea. But they say it doesn't work, but if they were going to be honest, they would add in that sentence, for them, or for the way they want people to be able to think, which is they want to be able to have sex with whomever, whenever, inside or outside marriage. That doesn't work for them to think abstinence is the only way, because it gets in the way of that. And what I've found is those who leave religion, typically, if you get down to it, at least the initial reasons that they'll leave religion, the primary reason is because they want to have sex outside marriage, and religion makes them feel bad about it. So they say there's no reason for it to need to work because they want it to not work, right? They want to have free love. And this person talks about birth control. And to be honest, I like birth control and I hate it at the same time, because it allows, in their words, in red, it allows women to express themselves as the sexual beings that they are. Well, to be honest, we're all sexual beings in a way. But if they were going to be truthful and we'd amend this phrase, we would say it allows women to express themselves as sexual beings without responsibility outside of marriage. And even inside marriage, but it allows them to basically have sex without worrying about being responsible for children, which is kind of a really backwards way of thinking, because I guess the most responsibility we could possibly have, the most power we could have, is to be a parent. That should be a beautiful and wonderful thing, not something to be avoided. But even if you do want to avoid it, for a period of your time, maybe it's not a good period of time for you, birth control can work if, and this is why I love and hate it at the same time, it can work if you're willing to accept that birth control may not work. So if the girl gets pregnant and you're using birth control, you have to be willing to say, I accept the pregnancy, instead of I kill the baby. Because if you're willing to accept it, I think birth control is great. If you're willing to accept it, pregnancy may happen. If you're not willing to accept it, and your first thought goes to abortion, I think birth control is awful because it encourages you to do things to bring responsibility that you're not willing to accept, which leads you into the trap of having to kill. I think we can all agree that killing is bad. It's like one of the worst things that you could possibly do is kill an innocent person. Anyhow, so they continue on. A couple more things I wanted to highlight. They say birth control prevents unnecessary abortions, and it doesn't prevent all of them. It prevents some. So to be more honest, we would have to say prevents some unnecessary abortions. And to that end, it is kind of good. But when you get people thinking that they can avoid responsibility, they'll tend to do that activity more. So that's one of the reasons why I don't like birth control, because it, I think, encourages people to have sex outside marriage with the expectation that they are not going to get pregnant. And that encourages a lot more of that behavior and a lot more pregnancies and a lot more abortions. So I think to that end, that way of thinking is insidious and horrible. And then abstinence does work. I'll tell you, it works in my life. I have never had a pregnancy that I didn't want, and it's never been outside marriage. It works. You just have to have good values, and good values only come from good parents, and good parents only come from responsible adults that accept responsibility for whatever happens. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of that. So that's the real key, is focusing on responsible people, raising responsible children, because that's where it all starts. Children learn to be responsible adults by being raised in responsible ways. Okay, let's see. So they want single married people to enjoy sex without the burden of worrying about having kids. I do like how birth control protects against STDs. That's nice. But there's a bigger problem associated with STDs when you're having sex to have kids, because sex naturally brings kids. So there's really a whole level of discussion that needs to be had when you stop thinking about free love, when you stop thinking about sex without responsibility, and you start thinking about it in its proper context of no abortions, no killing babies just because we find it convenient. So anyhow, this last sentence, the fewer abortions are necessary when you educate people about birth control, I think is actually wrong, because you're actually encouraging people to have sex when they're not ready to take responsibility for pregnancy. So I think it's wrong, because when you encourage more of something, you're not going to get fewer of something. Though, to be honest, the only acceptable answer for deaths is 0. That's the only acceptable number. I hope you can agree on that. But if you can't, let's look at a real abortion. I believe this is 12 weeks, and I want you to see this baby as exactly the same, but in a different phase of development, as some of the pictures I showed earlier of a baby in the womb or a baby just born. It's all the same. It's the same DNA, it's the same potential, it's the same sacred responsibility. And once you can learn to accept that it's all the same, learn to accept that this baby is just as much a person as any other older baby that we're accustomed to seeing, then I think it will be a lot easier to accept that abortion cannot be allowed, except in the most dire situations. Less than 1% of all abortions, probably less than 1% of that. That killing is never an okay answer to anything, including any crimes. Finally, just to wrap this all up, the attacks on the family and forcing people to think about sex as something that can be done without responsibility outside of marriage, and then killing any, quote, unwanted pregnancies, to get people to think that that's acceptable, undermines the family. Also, other progressive ideas that men can be women and women can be men also destroy the chances of these children of having the father and the mother with their unique characteristics embedded in their DNA and their genes and their who they are. It denies these children, these two-parent families, with the mother and the father, to raise these children up to be good, happy kids, to be empowered to raise up their children to be good, happy kids. So in the end, all of these attacks with transgenderism, homosexuality, abortion, these are all attacks on the family. And my goal in this video is that you can look at a good family with kids raised well, with good values that play well with each other, even into adulthood, where people like them, love them, want to be around them, brings a society of happiness and love and goodness. People aren't engaging in crime and hurting each other and killing each other because they were raised in a good family with good values. And to be honest, I have a suspicion that one of the fundamental pillars of this goodness of parental responsibility is religion. I believe it is in the gospel of Jesus Christ. This is a theory that I have because of the teachings unique in the gospel of Jesus Christ of unconditional forgiveness, which is definitely required in marriage, and many of the other teachings of repentance, of staying together, of families being the core of the church, being the core of the gospel. I believe that to be successful as a parent with your parental responsibilities, that you need to embrace Christianity and the values therein. But to be honest, I don't have the solid proof of that yet. And I would be interested in seeing if there are those who managed to raise good, responsible kids that believed in abstinence, that believed in faithfulness within marriage, who maybe somehow taught those principles, those values without the gospel of Jesus Christ. Though I think there's a lot lost with children that don't understand how to forgive unconditionally. The idea of someone hurting you massively and still being able to be at peace with it, and to be able to let it go, be fine, not to live your life in misery because of the offenses of others. So I don't think that's possible without the gospel. And so my final note would be to leave you with the gospel of Jesus Christ is integral to protecting the family and the foundational principles of the family, and raising happy, mentally healthy, good kids that are ready to and now one more thing I wanted to mention is that failure at any part in this, I call it a cycle, where you've got parents creating children, and those children grow up to be parents themselves. A failure in the parental responsibilities disables the children to be able to embrace the parental responsibilities that they're going to have future in life. And then if they don't have those responsibilities, then their children are going to be failed as well, and a cycle of misery. And interestingly enough, it only takes one generation also to save children from that cycle. So you just have to take two kids that maybe their parents failed them, but they figured out that their parents failed. They figured out that they need to have proper values, and then they have their kids. They can, as a two-parent household, they can raise those children with good values, with good love, and respect and decency and all that, and then break the cycle. So I think the cycle can be broken in one generation, either for good or for bad. And so every time it falls on you as an individual to be responsible. Please consider the importance of the family. I believe it's the foundation of society. It's the foundation of happiness. It's the foundation of God's plan. And thanks for watching. Please share this. I think a lot of people need to hear that responsibility, that leads to power, and power is what leads to happiness. Good power used in responsible ways.